These are four visual masterpieces that manipulate the human brain directly by replacing dialogue with sensory overload, proving that images speak louder than words. In 2006, one director wanted to release his violent production without a single subtitle, trusting the expressive acting to carry the story, which meant the camera had to capture raw adrenaline instead of words. Another production forced crew members to collect and sort thousands of autumn leaves into distinct shades of orange for a single sword fight, which forced the audience to feel the transition of seasons. Rejecting lazy tricks, these filmmakers chose instead to transform tone and geography into pure narrative power, which is why these movies still look spectacular. Our story begins in the Mexican jungle, where authentic survival replaced computer-generated imagery. Mel Gibson released Apocalypto on December 8, 2006, intending to prove that true tension cannot be manufactured in a studio. The production dragged high-definition Panavision Genesis cameras deep into the rainforests of Veracruz, Mexico, where actors ran through thick mud and battled real weather. To escape his captors, the protagonist, Jaguar Paw, played by Rudy Youngblood, leaps off the 165-foot Aipantla Falls. Youngblood performed this high-altitude stunt himself, jumping from a 15-story building equivalent with a safety harness, which artists later painted out electronically, forcing the audience to feel the unsettling gravity of the moment. Gibson avoided CGI green screens completely, which meant every leaf, splash of mud, and drop of sweat pulsed with authenticity, presenting an environment acting as an unrelenting predator, capturing a raw sense of panic that synthetic effects simply cannot hope to replicate on a computer. The jungle of Veracruz offers muddy chaos, but Zhang Yimou's Hero, released in China on October 24, 2002, treats the screen as a canvas. Yimou and cinematographer Christopher Doyle structured the movie around 5 distinct hues to represent different versions of a single assassination attempt. Red represents passion and deceit. Blue signifies intellectual truth. White represents objective reality. Green shows peace, and black marks the cold truth of the Emperor. This coding kept the narrative surprisingly clear, meaning the audience immediately understood whose perspective they were watching, which is why the visual style directly drives the plot. For the famous duel over a lake in Zhoujaigo National Park, the crew waited hours daily for the wind to die down, because they needed the water to act as a perfect mirror, and their efforts yielded a sequence where characters appear to float, demonstrating that pigment can communicate complex psychology far better than dialogue. Hero used vibrant palettes to represent truth, but Robert Rodriguez took the opposite approach on April 1, 2005, with the release of Sin City. Rodriguez resigned from the Directors Guild of America because they refused to let him co-credit comic artist Frank Miller as co-director. He shot the entire movie against green screens in Austin, Texas, using high-definition Sony cameras, which meant the visual team painted the backgrounds in electronically later. By draining the frames of all tint, the filmmakers created a harsh monochrome world where selective color acts as a visceral shock. A splash of red on a dress indicates danger, while a flash of blue in a character's eyes signals vulnerability. This selective coloring forced the audience to focus on specific emotional cues, resulting in a film that looked exactly like a moving graphic novel, showing that removing color can highlight emotional intensity. While Rodriguez used chromatic tints to highlight violence, director Gary Ross used them on October 23, 1998, to symbolize human liberation in Pleasantville. This production represented the first major Hollywood project to scan and digitize nearly 160,000 frames of film, allowing artists to manually paint color back into a black and white world. In this story, Two modern teenagers fall trapped inside a black-and-white 1950s sitcom town. But as the residents experience real, messy human emotions like love, anger, and desire, the gray environment begins to bleed into vivid life. A red rose blooms after a romantic encounter, forcing the community to confront their repressed desires. And their effort produced a visual metaphor where color represents the beautiful chaos of real life. By using technology to control every pixel, the filmmakers showed that living in full spectrum requires accepting both pain and joy. Through over 2 decades of technological shifts, these 4 films prove that cinema can speak directly to our senses without relying on heavy dialogue, which means the images themselves carry the weight of the story. Because of this, these directors showed that the screen acts not as a window, but as a canvas, so the imagery itself becomes the narrative. Tell us in the comments which of these visual worlds captured your imagination. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into cinematic history, and select our next video on your screen right now.